Greetings, car fanatics. This is my 2010 Porsche 911 Carrera S that I've owned since 2014. A month ago, I was seriously considering selling my car because I was getting bored with it and it didn't drive comfortably around the roads of Dallas. But then I thought to myself, it's going to be hard to get another 997.2 with a 6-speed manual given how pricing trends have looked. So instead, I decided to double down on my ownership. In this video, I'll be walking you through my entire process for refreshing my car's suspension so it could feel good as new. I'll show you all the parts I'm using, tell you how much they cost, show you the condition of the various suspension components we'll be removing, and answer the most important question of all: was it all worth it? What I won't be providing is step-by-step instructions because there are plenty of great videos on YouTube. Instead, I'll leave links to helpful DIY videos that I watched and provide a downloadable list of all the parts you'll need to overhaul your 997 suspension. Here's everything I'll be using to refresh my suspension. We have 30 various parts and dozens of new nuts and bolts. Starting with the front, we have Bilstein B6 shocks. The B4 Damtronics are the original equivalents for the standard PASM cars, but because my car has the sport suspension option, aka PASM, it uses stiffer shocks, so I thought the B6s would be a good fit, but we'll see later on that I should have actually used the Bilstein B8s. We also have new shock mounts, lower control arms, forward control arms, sway bar end links, and sway bar bushings. Most of these parts are made by Miley, which are equivalent to the genuine Porsche parts, but at half the cost. Moving to the rear, we have Bilstein B6 shocks, new lower control arms, tuning forks, toe arms, upper control arms, aka dog bones, sway bar end links, and sway bar bushings. I didn't get new shock mounts because I replaced those last year, and I'll be reusing them. Then up in this corner, we have new inner and outer tie rods to freshen up the steering. To install them, we'll need a special inner tie rod removal kit, which I purchased on Amazon. You also need some special pliers for some clamps. Finally, we have a box of genuine Porsche nuts and bolts because Porsche states that these are single use. It wasn't cheap, but hey, what's spending another $350 when you're already $3,500 in the hole on suspension parts? Now, what you don't see among the parts list are springs. I'll be reusing mine because they're not sagging and springs generally last longer than shocks. Plus, genuine Porsche springs would have added another $1,000 to the project. Let's get the project started by taking apart the entire suspension. We're going to start by raising the car and removing the wheels. And now let's disassemble our front suspension. It's mainly just removing a lot of nuts and bolts that are torqued pretty tightly. Be patient and keep track of all your tools and all the parts you're removing because you could easily lose track of things. It's also critical that you use a ball joint puller because there are several ball joints that need to be separated. Now we can disassemble the inner and outer tie rods using our special tool. Now we can move on to the rear suspension, which is largely the same process as the front. Alright, car fanatics, we have all the components off the car, and let me give you a summary of what is good and what's not. Essentially, anything with a rubber bushing like this is going to be in okay shape. The failure we're starting to see is separation. So for something like these dog bones, you can see that the bushing is starting to separate, but otherwise it's intact, and when I try to flex these, they're very stiff. So in general, these bushings are okay on my car at 78,000 miles. What isn't okay are the ball joints. So these ball joints, as you can see here, it's starting to leak a little and it's just really floppy. You shouldn't be able to do this. Here's the other front lower control arm ball joint. Just really easy to move. And then when you move to these tuning forks, check out these ball joints. I could easily move them by hand, whereas with the new ball joints, you can't even move them with your hands. You have to use a pry bar, and even then that takes effort to move them. And then looking at some other ball joints, like the rear lower control arm ball joints, you can see here that it's actually leaking, but super floppy, just easy to move around. Shouldn't be this loose. And then these tuning forks in the rear are also like that. that is essentially it. So anything with a ball joint really should be replaced at 78,000 miles or so. The actual rubber bushings are okay. Moving to some other suspension components, let's take a look at the bump stops. So these are the front bump stops. Now these I already replaced, but the original ones were way disintegrated, probably at around 65,000 miles. You could just touch them, they'd fall apart. But for the rears, the bump stops are okay. Now the front of the suspension, what I've noticed, is taking a lot more wear and tear than the rear of the suspension, and that's because the front of the suspension is going to really hit all those bumps and soak those up first before the rear goes over everything. And then looking at the sway bar end links for the front and rear, they're all bad. They're just super floppy, easy to move around with your hands, so we're definitely starting to wear out at that mileage. And then your sway bar bushings, this is one from the rear, but for the front and rear, the sway bar bushings have no problems at all, no cracking. And with the bushings on the car, trying to pry the sway bar, you can see that it really doesn't move. I only replaced the rear sway bar bushings because I had to take off the sway bar anyways, so I just put the new ones in while I was at it. But I didn't replace the front sway bar bushings because I didn't want to spend an additional hour or so replacing the sway bar bushings up front. And then looking at these strut mounts, they're actually in decent shape. So this is the front strut mount. There's no cracking or anything like that in the rubber, so nothing wrong with this. The rears have this absorber. These absorbers have already been replaced. I did that in a previous video, but you can see here with these absorbers, which were replaced around 75,000 miles, they just start to get a little soft. And for other people, probably upward of 100,000+ miles, you'll start to see this fall apart. So it's a good idea to replace these periodically. The dust boot covers, they are perfect for the front and rear, no issues with that. Looking at the inner and outer tie rods, it's the same story because they have ball joints. These ball joints aren't too bad. They're not that floppy, but the new ball joint outer end links are stiffer than this. And then this joint right here for the inner, you can see when I try to hold it up, it doesn't support its own weight, it just droops. If we look at the new inner tie rod, it can easily support its own weight and not do this. With all the control arms, end links, and tie rods out of the way, let's go ahead and cover the shocks. We're going to do some compression testing and compare it to the new shocks to see just how worn out the front and rear shocks are. From the left to right, we have the front left, front right, and the new B6 shock. Let's test the compression of rebound of each shock. The front left shock is easy to compress. I may be putting 50 pounds of weight on it and it's easily going down. But whoa, check it out, it's unable to raise itself. This is definitely a bad shock. Moving on to the front right shock, it's a little stiffer but still easy for me to compress. And it's raising itself back, but a little slowly. This is a worn shock. It's not completely gone, but it's definitely looking worn. Now the condition of the front shocks is probably a big reason why my car felt crashy over the bumps. Let's go ahead and check out the new B6. We can see it's very stiff. With the same amount of pressure, I cannot compress the B6 at all. I need to put my entire weight on it, and even then, I don't think I'm compressing it all the way down. It's also returning more quickly as well. So there you go, the front shocks are shot at 78,000 miles. Now let's compare the original rear shocks versus the Bilstein B6 shocks. The original rear shocks definitely require more weight to compress them versus the front shocks. I have to put about half my weight. They also return to their original position at about the same rate. These shocks seem a bit worn, but they're still okay. Now let's check out the rear B6. Like the front B6, I have to put all of my weight just to get it to compress, and it returns pretty quickly. This isn't surprising because we know the B6 is a stiffer shock than the B4, and the B6 is still likely stiffer than a brand new PASM shock from Porsche. Overall, we can see that the front shocks have taken more of the brunt than the rear shocks. It's a good idea replacing these suspension and shocks now because it should make a big difference on the driving feel for the next several years to come, which is important if I'm going to hold on to my car. Alright, so we've covered the condition of the stock suspension. We have the new suspension on the car. Let's go ahead and cover the various torque specs and then we can jump into driving impressions. These dog bones are torqued to 81 foot-pounds, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Your strut top mounts are torqued to 23 foot-pounds. And then going down to the lower portion of the strut bolt right here is torqued to 65 foot-pounds. The toe arm right here, the ball joint is torqued to 56 foot-pounds. The end of the toe arm that's tied to the eccentric bolt is torqued to 74 foot-pounds. And then for the lower control arm, that side is torqued to 74 foot-pounds. Then you have the tuning fork, which is attached right here. That's torqued to 118 foot-pounds. And then the other end is 118 foot-pounds as well. And then there is a ball joint that connects for the lower control arm to the hub, and that's torqued to 56 foot-pounds. And then if you're removing the brakes, that's going to be torqued to 63 foot-pounds. And then your sway bars, let's go ahead and talk about that. When you remove the bracket, you retorque that to 17 foot-pounds. And for your sway bar end links, you're going to torque each of them to 48 foot-pounds. And just to re-emphasize, it is super important that you torque everything at ride height. So take a jack up the lower control arm, and then when the car itself starts to lift up, that's how you know you have it at ride height. So torque everything down once it's at ride height. And then let's cover all the torque specs for the front. Strut mount, 23 foot-pounds on the top. You have the end link over here, and that is torqued to 65 foot-pounds. Then you have your lower control arm. That side is torqued to 89 foot-pounds. Then you have your forward control arm. That end is torqued to 118 foot-pounds. And where this end meets the lower control arm, that's 118 foot-pounds. The ball joint that attaches to this hub is torqued to 56 foot-pounds. And then for your tie rods, the outer end link ball joint is torqued to 56 foot-pounds. This right here is torqued to 40 foot-pounds. And then the inner tie rod that attaches to the steering rack is torqued to 59 foot-pounds. And then the brake calipers are 63 foot-pounds for the top and bottom. Alright, now that everything is said and done and we've covered the torque specs, let me share a valuable lesson I learned about picking the correct Bilstein shocks. My car has the Sport PASM suspension, which is 10 millimeters lower than a standard car with PASM. I spoke to Bilstein technical support, and they assured me that the B6 is the right shock, but were they right? So here's my B6 shock. It comes configured with the perch set to the upper setting, which increases the ride height compared to my original setup. So the perch needs to be set to the lower setting. This is super important. When you purchase Bilstein shocks for the rear, you really need to double check the perch setting, or your car may end up higher or lower than you want it. So in my case, when I set the perch to the lower setting, you can see here that the shock is too tall for the spring. The spring is just loose inside the shock. Now once you mount the shock on the car and torque the various control arms, the springs are no longer loose and just have a tad bit of preload. However, a shorter shock would still be ideal. Once I got the car to ride height, I ran into another problem. The bump stops included in the rear B6 shocks are too tall for my car. This means the car was literally riding on the bump stops. To remedy this situation, I replaced the bump stops with the Porsche PASM bump stops, which are shorter. All in all, you can make the B6 shocks work for a car with PASM or a 997 with lowering springs. However, you can avoid all of these issues by just purchasing the correct shock, which is the Bilstein B8. If you don't have lowering springs or the optional sport suspension, aka PASM, then either the B4 or B6 is appropriate. The B4 is the closest to the original shock. However, the B6 is also designed for the stock ride height, but it will be stiffer and a sportier shock. So after spending over $4,500 to refresh the suspension, was it worth it? Driving around town, the car rides a lot more comfortably. The worn out shocks felt very crashy over bumps, but the new suspension just soaks up all those bumps nicely, even though the suspension is a little bit more firm. So overall, it is more comfortable than worn out shocks despite being more firm. And then in the handling department, the new suspension has done a good job really stiffening up and reducing the body roll. So in the corners, you don't feel as much body roll. The car just feels very planted. I imagine when the car was brand new, it probably felt closer to this. So overall, it was expensive, but a really nice upgrade to get the car feeling like new. So I definitely recommend it. All right, well, there you have it, car fanatics. That is my journey of refreshing the suspension on my 997, which is one part of a larger project to make my car feeling like new again. If you're interested in doing this to your car, I'd highly recommend it. You can find links to the torque specs and all the parts I've used in the description below. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Leave me comments or questions below, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you're notified each time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching.